Okay, so let's start with a thought experiment. If you wanted to kill a decentralized movement, something that lives on servers all over the world, no single head to cut off, fueled by ideology, how would you actually do it? The standard playbook, the one we all know, says you just ban it. You pass laws, you send out the cease and desist letters, you try to choke off banking access.
Right. That's the brute force method. That's pretty much what we've spent the last decade worrying about.
What if that's completely wrong? I'm looking at this new piece. It just dropped from Bruce Stewart a few days ago called Freedom is the Threat. And he's arguing that the brute force method, that's actually the amateur move. If you really want to kill crypto, you don't attack it from the outside, you hollow it out from the inside.
It is a really disturbing thought, isn't it? Because we're so used to looking for enemies at the gates. But Stewart's suggesting we should be looking at the very foundation of what we're building. This article, and it comes from the perspective of the team at Metallicus, it's a serious wake-up call. It basically suggests that while we were all busy fighting for, regulatory clarity, the actual soul of the industry, the whole freedom part, started getting engineered out of the system.
And that is the hook for today's deep dive. We are not talking about price action. We are not talking about the latest meme coin supercycle. We're going to unpack a thesis that says the biggest threat to crypto is its own dilution. We're going to look at why convenience might actually be a trap and why compliance might be the only way to save privacy. I know that sounds totally backward. Bear with us. And we'll look at how infrastructure, specifically the kind Metallicus is building with the metal blockchain, is trying to engineer a way out of this whole mess.
It's a dense piece, for sure, but it is so crucial. It pivots the entire conversation away from adoption and toward sovereignty.
So let's start there, with the attack vector. Stewart argues that the powers that be, they've realized they just can't shut off Bitcoin or Ethereum. The networks are just too resilient. So the strategy shifts. He calls it capture, dilution, and fear-based discouragement.
Right. You have to think about the economics of control here for a second. Stewart makes this really, really sharp point. He says, fear is cheaper than force.
Meaning it costs less to scare us than it does to arrest us.
Oh, way less. Significantly less.
Yeah.
Just imagine the cost of trying to physically police a global decentralized network. I mean, it's a logistical nightmare, right? It requires manpower, international cooperation, endless legal battles. It's incredibly expensive. Now, compare that to the cost of just flooding the zone with noise, with regulatory ambiguity, with complex hurdles that just exhaust the builders.
It's asymmetric warfare.
Completely.
Yeah.
If you can make the environment so confusing, so high risk, that the only people who can navigate it are the massive incumbents, or, the people willing to cut corners, you've effectively neutralized the threat without ever firing a shot. You haven't killed the technology. You've just made sure that the only version of it that survives is the one you can control.
That reminds me of that quote in the text from Marshall Hayner. He says, they want to crush the crypto movement from the inside. It's not about destroying the database. It's about destroying the whole purpose.
Which brings us to the hollowing out. And this is where I think a lot of people, even veterans in the space, are kind of getting tricked. The article argues that we are being sold a version of crypto that looks like the real thing, but it's missing all the vital organs.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a second. We want mass adoption, right? And mass adoption, it requires ease of use. If I have to write down a 24-word seed phrase and bury it in my backyard, my grandma is never, ever going to use this stuff. So isn't all this complexity just the price of being early?
And that is exactly the narrative that Stewart attacks. He calls it weaponized complexity. The argument isn't that things should be hard. It's that the industry is pushing a very specific solution to that difficulty. And that solution is, don't worry about it, we'll hold it for you.
The custodial trap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are normalizing this idea that custodial risk is just convenience. We're framing compliance as something that requires total surveillance. And the result is that we end up with a system that, has the glossy UI of a fintech app. It uses blockchain on the back end. But it offers zero improvement in actual sovereignty for the user.
So we're just rebuilding the existing banking system, but with slower databases.
Worse, we're rebuilding it with the illusion of freedom. Stewart lists these 4 pillars of what crypto should be: self-custody, open settlement, verifiable rules, and individual sovereignty. Now, if you look at the major platforms that are dominating this space right now, how many of them actually check all 4 of those boxes?
Very few. Most of them might check open settlement, maybe, but you have to ask permission to get on the ramp in the first place.
And that's the dilution. If you have to ask permission to withdraw your own assets, or If the rules of the game are hidden away in some terms of service agreement instead of being visible on-chain, you don't have crypto. You have a bank account. And the powers that be are perfectly fine with that. They don't fear the blockchain. They fear the freedom.
Freedom is the threat.
Right. They are more than happy to use the tech to make settlement faster for themselves. They just don't want you to be sovereign.
Okay, this is where the article takes a turn that I think is going to annoy some of our more libertarian listeners.
Sure.
We've established that the fake crypto is winning because it's convenient and compliant. Bruce Stewart's solution isn't to just run away to a private island and ignore all the laws. He argues that we need to lean into infrastructure that can handle regulation.
This is the paradox at the heart of the whole Metallicus thesis. There's this reflexive belief in crypto that compliance equals surveillance, that they're basically synonyms.
Well, aren't they? I mean, in the traditional system, compliance literally means collect all the data on everyone and report it to a central authority.
In the traditional system, yes, absolutely. But Stewart challenges this. He draws this really clear line between off-chain surveillance and on-chain compliance. And this is probably the most important technical distinction in the whole deep dive.
Okay, break that down for me. How can compliance be on-chain without just doxing everybody?
Well, think about the black box problem. When you get debanked by a traditional bank or your transaction gets frozen, do you have any idea why?
No. You get some generic letter that cites risk management or policy violation. It's completely opaque.
That is off-chain surveillance. It's discretionary. Some compliance officer or some algorithm you can't see decided you're a risk. You have no recourse. Stewart argues that this opacity is the real enemy of freedom, not the rules themselves.
So on-chain compliance is what? Like automated bureaucracy?
It's explicit, auditable, and applied equally. If the rules are actually coded into the blockchain, for example, on the Metal blockchain, then everyone can see them. It's just if X, then Y.
Yeah.
It removes the discretion. It removes the ability for some middleman to say, you know what, I don't like this person's politics, so I'm freezing their funds.
I see. So it's the difference between a rule of law and the rule of a ruler. One is public and predictable. The other is just whatever the boss says it is today.
Precisely. And the argument is, if you want to survive in a regulated world, which, let's be honest, is the only world that exists for mass finance, you have two choices. You can hide in the shadows and stay small, or you can build rails that enforce the rules transparently. And Metallicus is betting big on the latter. They are building infrastructure specifically for banks, credit unions, community banks, that allows them to be compliant without turning into these huge surveillance states.
This is that engineered freedom concept the article talks about.
Yes. Freedom isn't just a slogan you shout at a protest. It's code that you write into the stack. And if you engineer the system the right way, using things like on-chain identity, a DDD, where the user owns their credential, rather than the bank owning the data file, you solve the compliance issue without sacrificing the user's sovereignty.
But let's get specific on the tech here for a minute. The article very specifically pushes people to move to Metal. It feels a bit like a call to arms. Why does the author think we need a whole specific blockchain for this? Why can't we just run this on Ethereum or Solana or something?
You can try to retrofit compliance onto permissionless chains, and people are definitely doing that. But Stewart's point is all about architectural intent. The Metal blockchain is described as being built for banking, right from layer 0 all the way up.
What does that actually mean in practice?
It means the chain is designed to handle all the complexities of regulated environments natively. It's not a patch. It means the identity layer isn't some afterthought. It's baked right in. The source argues that trying to retrofit these old systems, or even, generic crypto systems, is exactly why we're failing. We need rails that can scale financially while still maintaining those 4 pillars we talked about, self-custody and open settlement.
So if you're a builder, the message is, stop trying to hack compliance into a system that was designed for anarchy, and stop trying to hack anarchy into a system designed for banking. Build on something that was actually designed for sovereign banking.
That's the pitch. And it connects directly to the survival of the movement. If we don't build these compliant, transparent rails, the traditional finance world will just build their own private blockchains that have none of the freedom and all of the control. And they will win because they have the distribution.
That is a terrifying thought. The idea that we could end up with some Fed coin running on a private ledger just because we were too stubborn to build a compliant public one?
Exactly. That is the threat of freedom being the threat. If we don't engineer a version of freedom that can actually function within the global economy, then the economy will just reject freedom entirely.
I want to shift gears a little bit to the psychological side of this article. Bruce Stewart spends a good chunk of text talking directly to the builders, the developers, the founders, and he acknowledges something that feels very real. Everyone is tired.
It's been a brutal cycle, hasn't it? The regulatory pressure, the market volatility, all the infighting.
And the noise. The article specifically mentions exhausting builders with noise.
It's a recognized tactic. If you can keep people busy defending themselves on Twitter or scrambling to meet some new arbitrary reporting requirement, they aren't shipping code.
It's a DDoS attack on your attention span.
That's a perfect analogy. But Stewart flips this whole idea on its head. He tells builders to view that discouragement as a signal.
Movements that don't threaten entrenched power are ignored.
Exactly. If you were building something irrelevant, if you were just making a better Tamagotchi, nobody would care. The SEC wouldn't be looking at you. The very fact that there is so much resistance, so much noise, proves you are over the target. It proves you're building something that actually threatens the status quo of centralized control.
So the advice is, what? Just put on noise-canceling headphones?
Essentially, yeah. The phrase he uses is focus harder. Don't fight louder. The natural instinct when you're attacked is to yell back, to argue. But arguments don't change systems. Code changes systems.
Fear decays. Infrastructure compounds.
That is the standout line of the entire piece for me. Just think about the nature of fear. It's high entropy, it burns hot, it spikes, but it requires constant energy to maintain.
Yeah.
You have to keep scaring people to keep them afraid.
It's unsustainable.
But infrastructure, that's low time preference. You write a smart contract today, and it can work forever. You spin up a validator node, and it strengthens the network cumulatively. Every single piece of infrastructure you build acts like a ratchet. It just clicks into place and holds the ground you've taken.
So while the attackers are burning billions trying to maintain this state of fear and confusion, the builders just need to keep laying bricks.
Right. And over a long enough time frame, the compounding interest of working code will always beat the decaying asset of fear.
Right.
But, and this is key, you have to survive long enough for that compound interest to actually kick in.
And that survival requires the right tools. We're circling right back to the infrastructure argument. You can't just build anyway if the ground you're building on is crumbling underneath you. You need a foundation that is resistant to that hollowing out.
And that's why the article ends on such a strong push for the metal ecosystem. It's arguing that they've done the heavy lifting of engineering the bedrock, the identity, the compliance, the banking connections, so that other builders can come in and deploy applications that won't just get shut down.
It's all about being indispensable.
Yes. Stewart argues we shouldn't be asking for a seat at the table. We shouldn't be pleading with regulators to please like us. We should be building systems that are so efficient, so transparent, and so secure that the banks have to use them just to stay competitive.
You win by being better, not by being louder.
You become the plumbing. And once you're the plumbing, nobody talks about banning you anymore. They just rely on you.
So we've gone from this scary idea that crypto is being hollowed out to the realization that we are letting it happen by choosing convenience over sovereignty, to the solution, building transparent, compliant, but still sovereign infrastructure.
It really feels like a maturity moment for the industry. We're moving from the move fast and break things era to the move deliberately and build things that last era.
It makes you look at your own portfolio and your own habits differently, doesn't it? I mean, we all talk a big game about decentralization, but how many of us are actually using tools that are truly engineered for freedom?
It's the ultimate litmus test.
So here's the thought I want to leave everyone with today. It comes from that friction between the convenient lie and the hard truth.
If Bruce Stewart is right, and freedom isn't some default state, but something that has to be actively engineered, then you really need to audit your own digital life.
The next time you open your wallet or choose a platform to trade on, or even just look at where you're keeping your savings, ask yourself this question: does this code answer to me, or do I answer to it?
Because if you can't see the rules and you can't audit the ledger, you aren't the player. You're just the game.
And in 2026, being the game is a very dangerous place to be.
Indeed.
A huge thanks to the Metallicus team and Bruce Stewart for the source material. It's a provocative read and, frankly, a necessary one. And thank you to you, the learner, for sticking with us through the noise. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.